Hi, I'm John DeDakis. I'm a novelist, a manuscript editor, and a former editor on CNN's The Situation Room with Wolf Blitzer. You're one to one with me, and I'm one to one with journalist Diane Dimond. Diane is an investigative journalist. She's been around, I shouldn't say it quite this way. You've been around a long time,
Long
but
time.
I've been around longer. Let's put it that way. And she's written a new book on guardianship, and so I want to talk about that. But I also want to talk about her long career, covering the OJ trial, breaking the Michael Jackson story, lots of things that we can talk about. So Diane, welcome to One to One.
Thank you, John. So great to be with you. Haven't seen
It's
you in a long time.
it's been a long time. We've been friends for a long time,
Yep.
even when I was back at CNN, and we're still not sure exactly how we met. But I think I'm your conduit to Wolf Blitzer, and I think that's sort of the main. You love me for Wolf, I think is what it's all about.
Well, Wolf was my TV boyfriend, but he didn't know that, you see.
Exactly.
So,
And I
yeah,
and I can say Ringo Starr taught me how to play drums, but he doesn't know that.
that's right.
So anyway,
I
listen.
was on Wolf's show, and you were the producer, and I think that's how we met. And then you came to New York for a book party for a book you wrote, and I met you there face to face, and the rest is history.
The rest is history. And you were very kind to blurb one of my books, Troubled Water,
Mhm.
and we have a lot in common with the business that we've been in. But let's talk about your new book. It is fascinating. It is complicated, but you make it accessible. It's
Oh,
about when guardianship goes wrong, and this is, as you were saying, this is a book. This is an issue that you've been investigating since something like what, 2015, something
yeah.
like that.
Yeah, 2015. And when you say she's written a new book about guardianship, people go, ho hum,
Exactly, but it's
because they don't
not.
really know what it's like. But then you say, like the system that Britney Spears was in for almost 14 years, except they
Mhm,
call it conservatorship in California for some
mhm,
reason. And then people go, oh, yeah,
mhm,
I know a little bit about that.
mhm.
Yeah.
And is what happened I mean, Britney Spears was in guardianship almost 14 years, and is hers sort of a textbook kind of situation for something that could happen to anybody, not just someone who's rich and famous?
Yes, absolutely. When you think of guardianship, when I first heard about this, I thought guardianship, that's something you do for children. But this is adult guardianship. And I'm here to tell you, John, it is so easy for one person to guardianize another and take away all their civil rights. All it takes is a lawyer to draw up a petition. It's called a petition for guardianship or conservatorship, and they present it to a judge. And that petition is supposed to explain why the targeted person, say it's you, John DeDakis, why you can't take care of yourself or why you need protection. And I discovered over the last 8 years that these petitions, drawn up by anybody, it could be a total stranger you don't even know, are often full of exaggerations, sometimes out and out lies. And the judges that hear these cases and get these petitions from a lawyer, an officer of the court, they read it and they say, oh my, wow, John DeDakis, he needs protection.
Mhm.
And they rubber stamp it, and you are in guardianship. And just let me tell you one more thing. Anybody can go to a lawyer and say, I think that person needs protection. It can be your landlord. It could be your next door neighbor. It could be an angry former business partner or former lover.
Mhm.
It could be a local antique dealer that has their eye on some property you have. And it's remarkably easy. You're going to think I'm crazy, but I spell it out in the book.
Mhm,
It's
you do.
remarkably easy to get a judge to start a guardianship, and then it's almost impossible to get out.
And one of the things you do in the book is that you create basically a scenario of how these things can happen. I mean, it can be a racket, and I think what one of the things that's stunning is that there's no oversight. There are laws, but they don't have teeth, and uh, it's something that could easily, one would think it could easily be stopped if the system were a little more cognizant about how the abuses can happen. And I
Yeah.
know you spell out how things can be fixed, but before we get to the fixes, let's talk about how it can be, in a sense, institutionalized. It can be made into a racket. How can something like that happen in a way that you don't even see it coming?
I love that you said the word racket, because that's what I wanted to call this book, The
Oh, right.
Racket. But
Right.
my publisher talked some sense into me, and we decided not to do that. But it is a racket. And how does it start and perpetuate itself? Because everybody involved in the system benefits financially. And so if there's something going wrong, if someone's misbehaving, no one within the racket is going to be a tattletale on the others, because that would take away their place at the trough. Here's the deal. Say John DeDakis is made a ward of the court. The first thing that happens is you're stripped of your civil rights. Seriously. You cannot hire a lawyer to defend you, except in a couple of states have recently passed that you can. You can't sign a contract. You can't marry. You can't decide where you will live. You can't decide what doctor you see. You can't drive. You can't spend your own money, because everything you own, your property, your investments, your home, your bank accounts, goes into the name of a guardian. Now, if that guardian is a member of your family and they're trusted and loving, works out just fine. If you're truly incapacitated, then this system works just wonderfully if you get a good guardian. But more and more, I discovered these judges believe that if a case has come before them, the family must be dysfunctional in some way. So they appoint a total stranger. And that total stranger can hire any other number of people to take care of you, John DeDakis, and your estate will pay for everything. And I mean everything.
Well, and some of these lawyers get what, $600 an hour for, opening emails, and, that just kind of racks up the bill that way.
And taking
Can,
phone calls from your family and making doctor appointments for you, if they even bother to do that. Yeah.
Now, it's one thing to be able to highlight the seamier side of guardianship and how that the abuses can happen, and that's an important public service. But in totality, do you have any kind of a sense of what percentage of guardianships are really in abusive situations and where they're being taken advantage of? I mean, how bad is it? Is it
How
mostly good
crazy.
and there are some abuses?
Yeah. No, listen, a lot of guardianships work out just fine, but lots and lots and lots do not. Now, I'm smiling as you ask that
But what
question,
percentage is lots?
because who knows? Honest to God, who knows? Because nobody in state or federal government, and these are state run programs, every state has a guardianship system or a conservatorship, nobody keeps track. I mean, we keep track of stolen vehicles in this country, missing children, but nobody keeps track of how many people are in guardianship. And guess what? There's about 2 million people in Britney Spears' condition. Now, she's one of the rare cases where she got out of guardianship. She might still need some help between you and me, but 2 million people are under guardianship or conservatorship in this country right now. And states combined have confiscated their estates to the tune of $50 billion every single year. Every single year. So with that much money floating around, who wants to keep track? Nobody wants to keep track. And can you see how the criminal element, the predatory element, would be attracted to work in this system? Because they don't even have to have a license to do it, except now 3 states have recently, California, Alaska, Nevada, you have to have a license to be a guardian and take over somebody else's life.
I want to read just an excerpt from near the end of the book. You say, first and foremost, we have to understand the size and scope of what we're dealing with. Any discussion about solutions to the defective guardianship system must begin with the admission that the general public really has no solid concept about how pervasive the problem is. To fully grasp the issue, you write, everyone seems to agree on the need for each state to establish a reliable, digitally accessible, and consistently updated database of guardianship and conservatorship cases. This would include a tally of each active case and particulars about the ward's age, health status, and prognosis, where they're located, the name of the judge assigned to the case, and each of their appointees, and the ward's date of death, if applicable. Once this state tally is accomplished, compiling a national database would be a veritable breeze. That has not already been that this has not already been done is curious, since the nation has been able to keep an official state-by-state tally of children living in foster care. But no uniform effort has been made to count the number of adults conscripted to guardianship and conservatorship.
I know. Isn't it amazing in this day and age, the digital age, every state counts them up and you report it to Washington and they put it in a computer. When I first started covering this in 2015, my first case I heard about was in New Mexico, which happens to be my home state. Right. I live in New York for many years, but that's where I grew up. And I started to dig, and without boring you, it's all explained in the book. I came to discover that on the guardianship rolls in New Mexico, which were really willy-nilly, county by county crazy, a full third of the people on the list were dead. But what happened to their estates? Nobody knew. Well, were they still open? Was the guardian still charging fees? Was there a lawyer getting fees? What happened? Nobody could tell me. And it happened in state after state.
And that really is what prompted you to make it a book, right?
Yeah. I followed my nose on it. I couldn't really make much leeway in the state of New Mexico, because the reason people don't know about all this, John, is because it's so secretive. It's a secretive system. The courtroom doors are closed. Court documents are sealed. Oftentimes there's a gag order put in place, and it's all under the cloak of HIPAA. Well, we can't release any information at all because, of course, it's about the capacity, the competence of the ward. And that's medical information protected by the HIPAA law.
One of the things that's interesting in the book is that I think one of the initial cases was from a friend of yours, and so you were actually in court in one of these hearings. And once they discovered that a reporter was there, you were escorted out. Yeah. So talk about that. I mean, you were actually in one of those sessions. Was that eye-opening in a way that really started to get you churned up inside about the abuses?
Well, I was already churned up from the New Mexico case, but this case happened shortly after in Pennsylvania. A woman named Betty Lynn Stanley, fabulous woman, so smart, not incapacitated. I can tell you right now, this woman had such a mind and was such a character. I got in, she and I had a cell phone conversation, many of them. And she said, I have to be in court next week, Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, which is sort of near me. So I got in the car and went. They were arguing over whether Betty Lynn Stanley should be able to keep her cell phone because, Your Honor, the lawyer said, Your Honor, there is a reporter who has been writing syndicated columns about her, and she's obviously talking to this reporter. She's putting herself in danger. The reporter might know how much money she has. She had $1.9 million, which is, of course, why she was targeted.
Right.
And lo and behold, I'm sitting in the courtroom, and somehow somebody figured it out and whispered to the judge, and he pointed to me and said, Who are you? Stand up. And I identified myself. And the lawyer for the guardian, also paid for by Betty Lynn Stanley to fight against her, stood up and said, Your Honor, this is the woman who's writing these columns, and she did not get permission from the Guardian to write those things. My husband was with me, also a journalist, and he stood up and said, there's something called the First Amendment. She doesn't need any permit. Anyway, I was briskly escorted out. But I got to see how it worked. Just to keep everybody isolated and quiet about what's going on, they wanted to take this old woman's only lifeline to the outside world.
Based on
talk to friends and know what the news of the day was on her telephone.
Based on your experience as a journalist covering politics and crime, are you in any way optimistic that things really could be fixed? I mean, we live in such a toxic political atmosphere right now. It would seem to me that for all of your good efforts, they're doomed because we can't even agree on what the facts are anymore.
Yeah. Oh, again, we don't even have a database. If you don't know how big the problem is, how can you get your arms around it? All I know is there's 2 million people in guardianship right now. And I met a lot of them I write about their personal stories in this book. They're not incapacitated at all, but they had money. I mean, if we are really a society that wants to help people and protect people, then you tell me, John, why are there so many people sleeping on the street in your Washington, D.C. and my New York City and California and Detroit and Dallas and Chicago? I mean, this guardianship system revolves around money, the money coming from the ward. Nobody cares about someone who, gets $50 a month from a small pension. They care about elderly people who've saved money all their life. Now they might have a little memory problem. They care about disabled persons who get $10,000 a month in government disability checks. $10,000 a month. A guardian can take that disabled person living with disabilities, and put them in a home for $3,000 or $5,000 a month. What happens to the rest of that money? Or young people who inherit money, or someone who wins a workman's compensation settlement or a medical malpractice settlement. They've got a target right here on their head.
Yeah, you seem to, if I understand you correctly, the linchpin in all of this is the judge. Yes. And if you've got a judge who, how can judges right now, without any kind of government law or anything like that, what can a judge right now do to be more aware of providing justice in a situation like this? What can judges do?
Well, they can question the petition for guardianship, the original document that comes to the court. And that, if we cut down on the ease with which a guardianship could be established, I'm telling you right now, we'd have a lot fewer guardianships. I need to explain that judges that hear these cases are in what's called equity courts. It depends on the state. It could be a probate court, a surrogate court. In Pennsylvania, it's called the Widows and Orphans Court. Mm-hmm. But they go under equity court rules, which are unbelievably unlike a civil court or a criminal court. In equity court, and I know this sounds dense, like it's very complicated, but it's not. In equity court, a judge can do whatever he wants. There's no due process guaranteed. There's no trial. You have no right to present witnesses to give your side of the competency story. It's really up to whatever the judge wants to do. And because there is the aging of America and more people living with disabilities, there's so many cases, they don't have time to say to the attorney, well, wait a minute, you're saying here that the daughter stole $100,000 from her mother? Well, show me the proof of that. They just say, oh, it must be true. A lawyer put it in a piece of paper. It must be true.
Do they rubber stamp these things because the dockets are so clogged and they just don't have the time?
That's part of the reason. Part of the reason is, too, I don't mean to malign the judiciary, but this is the lowest rung. in the judge hierarchy. You know, you got the Supreme Court in the state and the appellate court and the district court and the federal, and way down at the bottom is the guy or the woman, the man or the woman who could not make it in private law practice. So they become a judge, you know, and probably with the hopes of rising in the ranks, but they're not trained. I think they don't. I wish one judge, and I can give you a bunch of bad judges in this system, had to live under guardianship for a month. Just see what it's like. You
And
can't see your family. The guardian gets mad at your family. The guardian bans your family. They can
are these judgeships elected positions or appointed?
Many of them are elected, and many of them get campaign contributions from the very people that they appoint to these lucrative guardianship cases. Sometimes the judges in the state of Texas, for example, in some counties, they don't even have to be lawyers. I found a case, I got to tell you this story. I got to tell your audience this story. Found a case in Texas where a car mechanic had done a bunch of work for an elderly man who had a whole bunch, apparently, classic cars. And the old man was losing his memory a little bit and didn't pay and owed the man $30,000 or so. So the mechanic went to a local lawyer and he said, how can I get this guy to pay me? And the lawyer counseled him to go for guardianship. And he did. And this car mechanic became the guardian of a multimillionaire in Texas. Now, it took that family, of the millionaire's family, about 2 years and lots of money to try to finally undo that. But that judge was not a lawyer.
I do want to move on to, some of the other things that you've done with your career, but I have another quick question that comes to mind, and that is, if a family member of someone who's under guardianship is watching or listening to this, and they want to try to protect their loved one, do they have any recourse? What can someone do to try to intervene and overturn something like this, or at least get transparency?
Well, you can try to appeal to the judge in the case and just say, Your Honor, the guardian is blank, 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 but you better have proof. And you better have a judge that will listen to you. I found lots and lots of judges who said to family members who stood up in court during a hearing, Your Honor, may I be heard? And they say, no, go hire a lawyer to talk to me. It's so discouraging and so difficult, but there is a growing number, very small, a growing number of attorneys that will take on a case for you and fight the other lawyer and the guardian and the judge. But the judge has appointed these people to take care of your loved one. So, I mean, what is the likelihood that a judge is going to admit that they appointed the wrong person? Very slim.
Yeah. Let's talk about.
Don't go to law enforcement and say, hey, the guardian, the all-powerful guardian won't let me see my aging mother, because law enforcement will just tell you, oh, that's a civil matter.
Exactly.
The judge has ruled. Sorry, we can't help you.
Well, I mean, your book it's very practical. It's accessible. It's very readable. And that raises then the question about the process. I mean, you've been an investigative journalist your entire career, basically. And I mean, it used to be where, they would say investigative journalist, that's redundant.
Yes.
But it really isn't, because nowadays, journalism has changed a lot. I do want to talk about journalism, but I want to talk to you about your process, because what impresses me about you is how you're able to synthesize all of this material and make it coherent. That's not easy. What's your system? How do you approach what you do?
I ask a few questions and I listen. I spent time, on local Channel 2 here in New York, reporting on the weather, and it's snowing, and be careful. And, that's being a reporter. But an investigative reporter needs to ask the right questions and then shut up, listen. Because the more you are quiet, the more people will tell you, because they want to keep the conversation going. They have someone who will listen to them. And I have to tell you, it's been an exhausting 8 years, because someone wants to tell you about their story, but it goes on for hours. And then they want to show you all the documents. And then they want to show you the picture of the ward of the court who they can't see anymore, and all the pictures from their childhood. And it's, you just have to absorb it all. And then my rule of thumb, John, I know this is going to just sound stupid, but it's to repeat the story as if I'm speaking to my mother.
Yeah.
I'm Irish, they're Irish storytellers. And I remember sitting at the kitchen table or calling my mother and saying, guess what I learned today? And just break it down to the simple, individual, unbelievable stories. As I did in this book, I tried to explain the complexity of the system and how it can harm people and help people by telling human stories. And so that's what I tried to do. I hope I succeeded.
How long did it take you to actually write the book? Once you'd done your research and it came down, to putting it together, how long did it take?
I had a major back surgery in November. And so I started like after Christmas in December, and I turned in the manuscript in August. Okay. Now, that's not to say as I'm writing, I'm still researching, because laws were changing or bills were being introduced, or the GAO had issued yet another scathing report about the guardianship system. So I had to delve into that. So I just kept real good files, on every single case, and I feel guilty because I didn't get all the cases in the book. Sure. And I'm sure there's probably some people a little peeved at me for that, but that's how I did it.
What kind of reaction has there been? Has there been blowback or encouragement? It's maybe too soon to tell, but what's been the initial take on how you did?
Well, all my reviews online are 5 stars, so that's good. This touches so many communities, I feel. If someone has an accident and they go into a coma, but they're okay in 3 weeks, they might have been guardianized, and then they can't get out. So it's people who have temporary psychiatric things. It's people who have had a stroke and then they recover. It's old people, it's young people, it's disabled persons. It's touched so many people, even the financial community. I'm getting feedback from them, because when you go to court on one of these cases, and the guardian will tell the judge at some point, Your Honor, I've spent all the liquid money. The checking account's empty, the savings account's empty. Now I need to bust that trust, or I need to sell their house, even though the house is in a will to be bequeathed to somebody else. And the judge will nullify a power of attorney, an irrevocable trust, the last will and testament. So I've gotten lots of feedback from the financial community about this. Like, wait a minute, I thought I had all my documents in order. Well, you may not.
Wow. Just wow. When as a reporter, when you delve into these kinds of things, Michael Jackson and this particular topic, how do you keep from being cynical, or are you?
Wow. No, I embrace my cynicism, because that's what keeps you going. What do we do as a reporter? What did you do as when you put together a show for Wolf Blitzer at CNN? You talk about what's wrong in society. And so that's what I looked for. Again, I write about guardianships that worked in this book. But it's the ones that didn't work, or the ones that were abusive or financially devastating, that sparked my cynicism about the whole system nationwide. Mm-hmm. And that sort of spurred me to go forward. It did. I don't like bullies. I just don't like bullies. I haven't liked them since the 3rd grade. And this system is replete with bullies who will tell you, well, we're here to help. It's that horrible family that couldn't take care of grandma. I'm here to help. Sometimes that's true, but a lot of times it's not.
Since the 2016 presidential election, we've been told that journalists are enemies of the American people.
Yeah.
And that, what you and I do is just fake news. What is, in your experience, the common misconception that people have about journalists?
Well, I can't, I have a few journalists in mind where I can't disagree with that assessment.
Sure.
The gotcha questions and the meaningless picking on personalities, and that's not ever been important to me. I think it's important for the public to differentiate between journalists. There are cable news commentators who aren't really journalists. They're there to give you their opinion night after night after night. And then there are people like in your local TV station who will stand up and tell you about a story they read about in the paper today. They didn't really investigate anything. They're just standing in front of the bank that was robbed a week ago and telling you how the bank was robbed. So investigative reporters, as you know, we spend a lot of time and effort and research and interviewing and confirming and document gazing. And, you mentioned my Michael Jackson book. I first broke that story in 1993 and then followed it over the years. And then in 2003, there was another young boy who came forward. And then in 2005, there was a trial. And that book did not come out until 2005. Mm-hmm. So, it took me all those years to really feel like I had the topic down where I could accurately write about it. And I don't say, do I think he's guilty or not guilty in that book? I just tell you the facts that I learned in the order in which I learned them. And I let the reader decide. So that's what an investigative reporter does. They take their time, they're thoughtful, they confirm as much as they possibly can. They go after all the interviews that they can get, and then they write it down.
I have not read the Michael Jackson book, but do you get into his upbringing and some of the reasons why he may have been the kind of person he was?
Yes, I do. When I first broke that story, I worked in television almost every night. We did another piece, and the phones never stopped ringing. I mean, there were people calling me from his childhood home in Gary, Indiana. There were people in the music industry, people in the entertainment, music industries that called, and, everybody wants to tell you a story, and you listen, but you have to figure out which ones are vendettas, which ones you can follow up on. So, yeah, I do a sort of a biography, but basically focused on me finding out that the police in Los Angeles liked him for being a pedophile. And you have to read that book, John.
What? I'm sorry? I missed that. Say that again.
I said, you'll have to read that book.
I will have to read that book. And what kind of reaction have you gotten from that? Because it's been out for a while.
Yeah, it has. I updated it with 4 new chapters for the audio book, if anybody's interested. What kind of reaction did I get? I still get death threats to this day from Michael Jackson fans. And this is another occupational hazard, I guess you call it. Way back in 1993, there was no internet. There was, nothing much. I got a lot of mail that said the terrible things they wanted to do to me. I had people waiting outside the studio door at night to harass me on my way to my car. My house was vandalized, things like that. But then in 2003, when I broke the second story, now we have the internet. And if you go back to Amazon and look at the reviews of this book, it's replete with 1 star and 0 stars and horrible things said by Michael Jackson fans who probably never even cracked that book.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the way it was back then.
And how does one deal with those kinds of not reviews, but threats? How do you emotionally, psychologically deal with that?
Well, some of them are just, you could tell they're silly kids. Many of them came from Germany or Norway or Ireland or Australia. They'll tell you where they're writing from. And those I didn't worry about too much. But there were some that bothered me when they talked about my daughter or my husband. Or one woman said she and her friend were going to come and knock me down and gouge my eyes out with a spoon and scrub my face with a Brillo pad. Come on. You gotta let that roll off you sometimes.
Did you always want to go into journalism?
Yeah, I think so. I remember
Why?
being a kid
Why?
and telling my mother, watching Carol Burnett, and saying, I want to be on TV and I want to be like her, a comedian. I got on TV. I'm not a comedian, but I remember going into the post office with my mom as a young kid in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and seeing the mugshots on the wall. Remember when they used to do that?
Yep.
And just staring for as long as I could. Who were these people? Who were these criminals? Why did they do what they did? I just always had that innate curiosity, I think. And I started being a reporter on the radio when I was in high school. So the path always seemed clear to me.
Okay. And you said it, it's following your curiosity. It's just being curious. And that's the essence of it, right?
Yeah. And listening to what people are telling you. And, I told my husband this recently. I've gotten pretty good at body language too. When somebody's telling you things, you need to watch them, watch their eyes, watch their move. If they're like this and they're telling you something, or they keep looking down to the right, they're probably lying to you, so it's a combination of, well, I guess my folks probably would have told you a busybody who always wanted to know everything and tell stories. But I think it's deeper than that. I want to right wrongs, and I want to kick bullies in the you know where. And I want bad systems to change. Mm-hmm. I'm glad I'm not covering Capitol Hill anymore, because my hair would be fire there every day.
Exactly. Well, you did cover the OJ trial, and that was back in the day where everybody was covering the trial. There were cameras in the courtroom, and it went on for a long time. And you were in the courtroom, right?
I was. I must tell you, I wasn't in the courtroom every day. Mm-hmm. Another correspondent, Doug Bruckner, is the one who covered it every day. What I did was investigate. And I found one of O.J. Simpson's drug dealers. Or he said he was his drug dealer, and he said he'd been with him the night of the murders. So we got the preeminent lie detector person, polygrapher in Los Angeles, gave the guy not one but 2 polygraph tests, and he was telling the truth, according to the polygrapher. I rented a Bronco, much like the OJ Bronco, exactly, the same year, everything. And I had gotten from an LAPD source where they found blood in the Bronco. So I got red masking tape, and I put red masking tape every place there was blood, like on the back seat of the passenger, as if when you're backing out,
right,
that's where your hand would go. It was some on the accelerator, some on the door handle. And so those were the kind of stories that I did surrounding the O.J. Simpson case.
Was he guilty?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And of course, race played a big part in this, because the Rodney King, the police brutality stuff against Rodney King happened right, just before that happened. Mm-hmm. So the atmosphere was just entirely fraught.
Well, and the makeup of the jury and where they had the trial was downtown in the really urban center of Los Angeles. O.J. Simpson lived in almost lily white Brentwood, but that's not where they had the trial.
Mm.
So there was, race. It was race. It was class. It was celebrity. There's so many layers to that, as there was with the Michael Jackson case, that who knows why the jury did what they did in either case. But I think they didn't strictly follow what they were supposed to follow.
Yeah. I want to move on to your interview with James Earl Ray, the convicted assassin of Martin Luther King Jr. Of course, he said Raul was, his handler. I don't know a lot about, I haven't investigated it like you have probably, but I just wonder, was Ray really smart enough to pull something like this off? He must have gotten some support from somewhere, right?
I came away, that was Brushy Mountain State Prison in Tennessee, and I've been in a lot of prisons. So the prison atmosphere doesn't bother me at all. He bothered me because he seemed to me to be so dense and dumb.
Mm-hmm.
He couldn't, it was probably one of the worst interviews I ever did because he was non-responsive. Mm-hmm. He was, at one point, I think the longest thing he said to me was, I said, well, did you kill him? Did you gun down Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.? And he looked at me for a long time and he said, you're asking me the wrong question. Okay, what should I be asking? You should be asking me about Raul.
Right.
Okay, well, what about Raul? Well, he's the one. He was probably him. I just found I don't know if he had brain damage or, seriously, he seemed to be a man that was just had a very low IQ, and I tried for more than 2 hours to get something from him. And I came away.
Did you come away believing that he was just too dumb to have done it and that he's a patsy or what?
No, I came away thinking that we will probably never know the full truth, but he was the best suspect they had. I didn't come away thinking, oh boy, this guy's really smart. He knew exactly where to stand. He knew exactly when Dr. Martin Luther King would come out of what door in the top of that Lorraine Motel. I didn't come away with that feeling that he could have pulled this off himself.
But we'll never really know.
But we'll never know. Like with JFK. Do we really know?
Oh,
that
yeah,
one
exactly.
I haven't investigated, so don't ask me about that.
Yeah, right. That's the one I'd love to have been on the grassy knoll that day to find out what was really going on.
Yeah.
You also co-anchored Up Front Tonight on CNBC with Geraldo. So what's Geraldo really like?
Oh, he's delightful. Listen, I've always said, and I say to him, we still text back and forth, that we practice very different kinds of journalism. But I enjoyed my time with him. I really did. We did a 7 p.m. newscast on CNBC, and it was a little irreverent, which was good. I liked that. We had a great studio set. And one night, I remember him talking to somebody about gun control. And the man kept saying, no, guns, we need to, I need to have all the guns I want. And Geraldo said, why don't you take a gun and shoot yourself right now? And I punched him. I punched him on the set. I said, you can't say things like that to somebody. You invite them on to be interviewed. Who are you, David Letterman? Bring people on to insult them? Anyway, that's the kind of way we rolled on that show. And it was briskly written, and I really enjoyed it. And again, I still stay in touch with Geraldo, and to me, he's a friend.
Okay.
And he never called himself Jerry Rivers. That's what he says.
I can't let you go without asking you about Trump, because you say you don't like bullies. And I can't think, he was the bully in chief, it would seem. That's just me. And he certainly disparages journalism and journalists.
Yeah.
So, I don't think you've done any investigating on Trump. But what do you think, just in terms of, let me ask it this way. How can Please explain to me how he's the GOP front runner right now
I
with
can
91 felony counts against him.
I cannot. I cannot. The only explanation I can say why he's the front runner is that he's not Joe Biden, and the public is pretty discouraged with his administration. Listen, I've been a registered independent my whole life, and so's my husband, because he was a CBS radio anchorman for 100 years. I can't explain politics today. I mean, when I covered Capitol Hill, here I'm really going to date myself. Tip O'Neill was the House Speaker.
Right.
And Tip O'Neill, Democrat, did not get along with Ronald Reagan, Republican. But when there was something vital that was necessary for the United States of America, he toddled on down Pennsylvania Avenue, had a big steak and a glass of scotch with the president, and they hammered things out. Well, that's never going to happen today.
That would be considered treasonous. That would be considered treasonous now.
Yes, yes, it would be. Everything is about the party. The party. I mean, I could go into current events, but people might be watching this much later. It's
Right.
all about the party and not about what's good for the country. And we've lost our way somehow. And I can't explain it. And I don't know. I don't see a way back. And no, I don't like Donald Trump because he is the quintessential bully.
Mm-hmm.
There. I've committed myself. I don't like it. I don't like what Joe Biden's done either. So
what are you working on now? What's next for you?
I'm working on claiming back a little personal time.
Good luck with that. You're trying to promote a book.
Honestly, yes, that's right. I've been going around. I was in Albuquerque for a signing. I was up in Boston last week. Other things are on the horizon, other speaking engagements. What's on the horizon? My husband's already saying, volume 2, gotta do volume 2. But I don't think so. I don't think so. I know what you're going to say, John, that I should write a novel.
I think you should write more than one novel. I think you've got a tremendous, there's just so much grist that you've already accumulated that's lurking in your subconscious and probably in your, your consciousness as well. But it's hard. It's hard to make that transition from, just the facts to making it up.
I don't know how to make up stuff. I am a researcher at heart, and I took one of your writing classes, which was fabulous. How many novels have you written now?
Well, let's see, 5 with the 6th one on the way, probably this coming year. Right.
Right. So, I mean, you've made it up 6 times, and you have a great main character, Lark Chadwick, who I love. She's a reporter. And I have to tell you, honestly, I have been thinking about specific scenarios now everywhere I go. Oh, that'd be a good opening for a novel.
There you go.
Maybe, and you could have a character that does this or that, so it's percolating. It's percolating.
Oh, you have just made my day, ma'am.
You're going to have to read my draft and help me.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. So anything else that you want to talk about that I haven't brought up yet?
Well, I'll tell you just quickly back to the issue of guardianship. If anybody wants more information, I've updated my website, and at the top navigation bar, there's something called Guardianship Central at dianedimond.com. No A in my last name, by the way.
That's right. Yeah. D-I-N.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. There it is. You can go to my website, and on that page, you'll find other informative articles to read. There's a FAQ, frequently asked questions. There's a glossary of terms, because this guardianship system, there's all these terms that you're not going to know what the heck they mean. So I've got a glossary there. There's some of my long form writing that I've done, a 6-part newspaper series I did that won some great awards. A piece in Real Clear Politics, Real Clear Investigations. I wrote a long article for them on guardianship. So yes, you'll see some of my other books there. That's a compilation of my past columns for Creators Syndicate with some updates. And that is about the White House gate crashers. Remember them?
Barely.
They did not crash the White House. And I explain it all in that book. And then, of course, the Jackson book. you can read more about me there, but I encourage people who are wondering, I'm thinking about guardianship for my loved one, or gosh, I'm already in a terrible guardianship. What can I do? The book is full of some suggestions to protect yourself, and there are some suggestions on the website too. So thanks for letting me plug that.
Well, you are entirely welcome, and it's such a joy to be able to interview you. I've been wanting to do this for a long time, formally. I mean, you and I've had some great conversations, but I'm grateful for the opportunity to share you with my friends.
Oh,
And
thank you so much. I really appreciate your time and your interest in this topic that I've.
well, thank you. I mean, my dad was a lawyer. He was a guardian ad litem from time to time. But I mean, this is small town, La Crosse, Wisconsin. It was back in the, 50s, 60s, 70s. And I think it's become much more of a racket since then. My dad was a pretty ethical guy. So I would love for him to read this book, but he's probably 114 now and not around. But
Well, I'll tell you something. It's not a new phenomenon. And as I explain in this book, and for anyone who's just seen the Martin Scorsese movie, Killers of the Flower Moon,
oh, right,
it's all about the Osage Indians and how the
right.
government cheated them. The government cheated them because they first put them into guardianship, the entire tribe. And I explain why in the book. Martin Scorsese I love the movie, but he disappointed me because he didn't explain why the Indians were so beleaguered, that tribe was so beleaguered. It was
Yeah.
because of guardianship.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
You and I could talk and talk and talk, and we will, but I need to leave it there. We've been one-to-one with Diane Dimond. I am John DeDakis. Thank you, Diane. To be
Thank you.
continued.